Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Covenant Eyes podcast. I'm your host, Karen Potter, the Director of Church and Ministry Outreach for Covenant Eyes, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Brandon Clark. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Karen. How are you doing today?
I'm great. We have an amazing show lined up for today. Super excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So I just want to give a shout out to our listeners. If this is your first time listening, you picked a fantastic show to join in. And if you've been listening for a while, thanks again for coming back week after week, because we get amazing guests like Joshua Broome, who we're going to introduce and visit with here in just a minute. But I do want to say that if this is your first time, or maybe you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, because like I said, we release a new podcast every week. So wherever you get your podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. The way that we get the word out about great interviews like today, and interviews and resources and tools and everything to work through the battle against pornography is because of you being willing to leave a review, you being willing to spread the word. So, so excited to have you all with us today. And we're looking forward to a great conversation. Karen?
Oh my gosh. Well, I just wanted to cut you off so quickly because I'm excited to introduce today's guest. So Joshua Broome is our guest. We are so honored to have you joining us today. We would love to just hear a little bit about your story. Most people probably know who you are, but for those who are just tuning in that might not be familiar with your testimony, your story, your journey, would you mind sharing a little bit about that so our listeners can get to know you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And also, thank you so much for having me. Covenant Eyes has been a great partner with me, and I always advocate for it because so many times I have the opportunity to have the conversation, and it's so great to have something practical to say, hey, do this. Any good sermon, it's like, I want you to know something, I want you to feel something, and now I'm going to call you to action. And I love that you guys have that piece that we can provide to people so that they can, live this life free of pornography. But long story really short, in 2006, I moved to Los Angeles to continue my pursuit of acting and modeling. I started acting and modeling when I was 14 or 15 years old. I went there, signed with an agent. Everything was going fine. And then due to a lack of judgment on my part, I said yes to a conversation that landed me inside a adult film agency. And a talent agent said, hey, I can get you a job doing this film. And while I know I should have said no, unfortunately, I said yes. And that decision, while at the time I didn't think it was going to be a big deal, it was going to be this one thing that I did that was dumb and it wouldn't impact my life whatsoever. And it did the absolute opposite. It changed the trajectory of my life. I lost everything that I had in that moment. I got fired from the agencies that I'd been pursuing signing with for almost a decade. I set my, career from, an acting and modeling standpoint, ablaze. I was kind of seeing someone, obviously that relationship ended, and I found myself saying, maybe I've messed up my life. Maybe I've ruined any chance at a real future. And I allowed that mistake to dictate what I did next. And what I did next was I stayed in that industry for 6 years. And I just was completely engulfed by it. In over a 6-year period, I did over 1,000 movies. I was nominated for Best Male Performer. I won that. And it's ironic that I was at the pinnacle of success in that industry from the outside looking in. Yet when I won that award as Best Male Performer in 2012, I realized that the money, the fame, and the all the accolades that came along with that, I believed that it would make me happy. I believe that if I had, if you're listening to this and you're in this position, it's like if I had the relationship, or if I had the job, or if I would get the promotion, and you believe the lie that that's going to bring me happiness, that's what I believed. And when I obtained everything that I thought would fill the void that I had in my life, it actually illuminated and amplified the despair and the depression that I had in my life. And that depression led me to contemplating self-harm. And obviously I'm here, so I didn't choose to do that. But that was the that was the season that I was in my life. And I left the industry, after 6 years. And I went on this journey of trying to run. I covered up my tattoos. I deleted my social media and I tried to run. But the reality was there was 1,000 pieces of content on the internet that wasn't going anywhere. And I, from the outside looking in, was one of the most well-known people in that industry. So I couldn't, as hard as I tried and as many times as I lied, and no matter what I did, I just couldn't escape it. And I find myself working at a gym and I'm doing okay. I'm working my way up in the health and fitness industry. And I meet a girl, and after many failed relationships and many failed, just even friendships, because I couldn't be honest. I lacked integrity. I was ashamed. And I wasn't forthcoming with my past. And I was like, man, here's this person that's amazing. And I just can't lie to her because she doesn't deserve to be hurt. So while assuming I'm going to be rejected, I share with her my past, and she looks me dead in the eye and is like, wow, I didn't think you're going to say that. And then she said something that changed my life. She said, I want you to know that your past, that doesn't define who you are. And your greatest accomplishment, that doesn't define who you are either. God defines who you are. And in that moment, I had grown up in the church. I believed that God was real, and I believed that he created everything. But for me, those two concepts, those two boxes being checked, I thought that solidified my faith. And what I came to know is the next question she asked, well, what is your relationship with Jesus like? What is your journey been like? And I didn't have an answer. And as I tried to speak, I couldn't, because for so many times I tried to be the person that other person on the other side of the table wanted to be. That first date, when you go on a first date, more often than not, you're not yourself. You're the version of yourself that you believe the person sitting across from you wants you to be. And then in that moment, I heard, okay, you want me to be a Christian? I got it. I'm going to put on that mask. And then I just couldn't utter another lie. And I was just like, I don't know. And in that moment, in my honesty, she met me with what I thought was going to be rejection. She was just like, okay, well, here's my story. I've been a Christian for, since I was in high school, and my family's Christians. And this is what my journey has been like. It's been up and down. And, this is the church that I attend. And I'm not perfect by any means, but, God has seen me through a lot of things. And then, do you like tacos? I'm like, what? and it wasn't that hard of a pivot, but I mean, she shared with me her faith, and there was not one question about what I used to do. She just boldly proclaimed like that. Well, that might be true about you, but that's not who you are. Moving on. And very like Colossians 4 verses 5 and 6, that we're called to walk with wisdom towards those who are without, and that our speech needs to be seasoned with salt. It needs to be gracious and seasoned with salt, so that we might know how we ought to answer each person. That each is so important. And the way that she responded to me, it cultivated curiosity. It broke down boundaries. And then the next week, she invites me to church, and I go, and I hear this message of reconciliation that I'd heard a million times, but it made its way to my heart. And I surrendered a lifetime of shame and guilt, and I gave my life to Jesus in that moment. And I love to celebrate that person that invited me to church, and that person that went on that walk with me. We've been married for almost 6 years, and we have 3 beautiful boys. So that's like a really
that's
short
amazing.
snap. That's just a short snapshot of my story.
Joshua, the title of our time together, the episode is The Danger of Not Addressing Pornography. Yeah. And there's many different angles one can go with this, but as I was, preparing for this episode and checking out your website and stuff, I watched the video on your personal testimony. And one of the things that really struck me was that you really didn't have a father figure in your life. Yeah. And that was probably part of the journey that led you to where you ended up and back again. And so I think it's very fitting to just talk a little bit about that as we talk about the danger of not addressing pornography.
Yeah. I mean, that's so important is, like Jesus wants to redeem and restore every aspect of humanity. And that the process that I've been on, it has been a process of restoration. And like it wasn't, yes, like salvation is instantaneous, but that sanctification process, it's been ongoing. And like you mentioned, as I become to know the person I actually am through knowing the one who made me, understanding how I'm wired allowed me to see, in my past, why did I do some of the things I did? So to speak to your point, Brandon, I have, am like in the 99th percentile when it comes to personality type as an achiever. And this can be a good thing, but if you're operating out of a lack of identity and you're trying to mask pain and you're trying to achieve value, it's going to work against you. So for me, absolutely. I grew up without a father, and it was a pretty unique situation because I lived in a small town. My mom had me when she was 16, and my father never rejected me. He was just 16 years old, and like, okay, well, I'll pay what I need to pay, but I'm not ready to be a dad. Yet here I am. I'm here on earth, and I live with my mom and her parents. It's still in high school, but the tough thing was, as I got older, this town had one grocery store. I would see him in it. So yet I see this man that's in close enough proximity for us to shop at the same grocery store. And he has the title of father, yet he was never my dad. And that called me to, look at myself. It's like, well, what is there something wrong with me? Like why does he want me? And what added to it is he gets married and has 2 children. And I see these children, a lot younger than me, but I see them growing up. I see them happy. I see them, I see him and his wife at sporting events, and it hurt because I was like, what, I didn't have a dad. At no point in my life did I ever have anyone outside of my grandfather that was a male role model in any capacity. So to speak to that, absolutely yes. It's like, man, I didn't know how to be a man. So it's like, how do I appropriate myself in this world if I'm lacking an identity? There is no true foundation that's laid by anything. I'm not Jesus, and not even a man speaking into my life saying, "Hey, this is how you should live. These are important things to know." I'm just kind of figuring it out on the fly, and it caused me to live my life searching for approval. I had to be the best at scholastics. I had to be the best at sports. I had to get the girl that no one else could. And that those conquests were momentary, band-aids that cover the wound that was in my heart. But to speak even deeper to your point, where I truly found freedom from that later on in life, like in Christian counseling, that praise God that I finally, had the humility to go to. I found so much freedom in, extending. I extended forgiveness to him like early on, when I gave my life to Jesus. But later on in my life, as I matured, I saw that I had justified things that I've done in my life, and I justified them because I blamed him. I blamed the lack of having a father, and I justified the decisions that I made. And then when I was in the place, from just a mature place where I could say, Jesus, you know what? I sinned against you upon my own volition. It was my fault. I knowingly made those decisions. Yes, shame and guilt and the lack of having a father were, that was real mental and emotional trauma, but God loves you enough to give you free will. And I freely chose to make those mistakes, and I lay them at your feet. And there's so much freedom that came from that. And that's why I want to share my story so boldly and so clearly. And just explore different nuances of it, because there's so many levels of that so many people experience, where that trauma dictates the decisions you make on a daily basis, and it gives you a blurred, a blurred version of the reality, or the future that you could have. Because I was thinking, well, I can't accomplish this, or I shouldn't strive to do that because I'm not good enough. And it was still something, even as a Christian, I was struggling with. And like, that was the moment for me that I really had a lot of breakthrough.
Wow, so good. And there's probably so many listeners that can really relate to that. I know a lot of people that, we all that have struggled with any type of sexual addiction or pornography use or, any of that. We all have that family of origin story and those things that impacted us. And so I think you bring up some really good points there that we do have to look to those to kind of understand why we are the way we are. And I love that journey that you've been on. How do you, because you talk a lot about your story and you share it so freely to help others find that freedom. How do you do that while still guarding your heart as you go around talking about the story and the journey that you're on?
Yeah, I mean, you're only as free as you're honest. So I surround myself with people who will both encourage me, but also give me critical feedback. Because I find for me, if I find myself in a place where I run from tough feedback or criticism, or if someone asks me, hey, Josh, how are you doing? If it's someone that I love and trust, and I'm not quick to say, because we all have something going on all the time, yet our pride tells us, suppress it. I'm good. I'm okay. But Jesus is calling us into something different. It's like, so like iron sharpens iron. It's like, man, it takes two to tango, right? So God wants to use people in your life to allow them into your circle so that you can experience freedom through confession, through like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I messed up the other day. So I've always had a mentor, Andrew Yates. He's on staff at DCS, at Dallas Theological Seminary. He's been my mentor for over 7 years. He was my mentor in person for 4.5 years. So he, like, literally, I gave my life to Christ. The next week, I walk into a pastor's office and I'm like, hey, obviously I'm a little crazy because you've heard my story. Like I'm pretty. I would talk to a wall. It's just like that. That's just who I am. But I want to just have a conversation with someone. Like, okay, let's hear it. I was like, I feel like God wants me to build a boat, and he's like, okay, can you explain that? And I was like, I feel like God's calling me to do something bigger than I can comprehend, and I want to be able to do it really well. And I know that's going to come through me being able to understand the context of the Bible. And he's like, well, you know what? There's this guy who recently graduated from DTS, and he just moved here with his family, and he's going to be helping launch a new campus here at this church. And he's got a little bit of time because, there's a transition and we're not launching that campus for a few months. He could probably spend a little bit of time with you today. And little did he know, or little did I know, that we would spend 15 to 20 hours a week together for 4.5 years. And he'd be the person that, encouraged me to go back to school. And, I went to Liberty University and studied Christian ministries, and I'm pursuing a master's in theology now. But he was the catalyst for all of that. But along the way, he would both give me a kick in the tail when I needed it, and he would always be quick to encourage me. So I would say you need people in your life that is something that I talk about a lot. So hot conversation. So honest, open, and transparent. You need someone in your life that you can be weekly honest, open, and transparent. And that is how I can talk about difficult things on a regular basis and guard my heart in the process.
That's so beautiful. I even see that in my own journey. I struggled with pornography for 16 years myself, and working in this ministry, you see that a lot. And I totally agree. I have an ally. I have somebody who I can turn to, who I can be real with, because it's kind of funny. I always joke with Tonya, like, people always ask you when you're walking down the street or something like that, how you doing? And you say,
Yeah.
good. And I was like, how would they actually respond if you said, I'm actually just really having a tough day? Like, it would catch people off guard, but we really need that type of relationship in our lives. You've seen, being in the industry for 6 years, you've seen the manipulation, you've seen the emptiness, the drug use, I'm sure suicidal thoughts in those who work in the industry. We know that pornography is a problem for men on a very large scale and for women at a growing level. If we don't, as a church, address the dangers of pornography, what are we running into?
Yeah. I mean, so as a dad, is like, I'm quick to throw dad jokes and I'm quick to throw dad references, but it's important for me to allow my children to do dangerous things carefully. Like, that's the best way to learn. But also, as their father, I want to protect them from things that could hurt them. So I need to tell my 2-year-old that the stove is hot. Don't touch that. And because he trusts me, he doesn't know if the stove is hot. He's never touched it. So he trusts me. So John 14:15 says, if you love me, you'll obey my commandments. It doesn't say if you love me. It says, if you love me. The tone is important. If you love me, you'll obey my commandments. So if we love people, we need to love them enough to tell them the truth. And if we don't tell them the truth, if we don't talk about pornography, if we don't talk about sex, if we don't talk about, how it's important for us to have, our smart devices locked down with accountability software, whether it be Covenant Eyes or something else, what we're doing is we're surrendering our authority. If we surrender the authority of having the first word, now we're playing catch up. Now we're playing this game where, well, such and such said that. And we surrender the voice of saying, hey, I love you enough to talk about this, even when it's difficult. Because a question that I get a lot is this, Josh, what are you going to tell your kids about your past? Well, I'm going to tell them the truth. And anything other than that would not be loving at all. And I for some reason in westernized culture, especially, truth has taken the backseat to feelings. But if we define love through the lens of what Jesus says love is, well, Jesus was willing to die so that we could live. So we should be willing to tell people the truth, even if it hurts. And I mean, just to that, it's like, we need to talk about the danger of pornography because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's not just on a site that you're going to. It's on Netflix. It's on social media. It's everywhere. And if we do not set people up to win, if we don't love our family members and the people that we lead in any capacity, if we don't love them enough to tell them the truth and have those difficult conversations, now we're going to have to be processing trauma, explaining, well, what is this, Dad? Why haven't you talked about this? And I think that's important as a church, because if the Bible is the foundation of truth, what we surrender, it's like I'm very visual, so I think about a pasture, right? So if our people are in a pasture and I surrender, sex and pornography, if I'm not willing to go into that part of the pasture, I surrender that to Satan. So we have to love people enough to talk about this, because what we're doing is if we allow the world to define, things, now we're going to have to be playing catch up, and we don't want to do that. So the danger is, if we love people, we need to tell them the truth.
That's so good. And, the culture is already defining these things, right? Especially for those of us that are parents, like, we know that everywhere on social media, the culture is telling our kids what sex is all about. So we really do need to step up and take that role in the family formation. Do you receive a lot of pushback from, pastors or other ministry leaders, about preaching and teaching on this while still having the content online? Do you get pushback at all from anyone?
Yeah, and I do, and I love to share with them that maybe I know the Bible a little bit better than they do because I get to point to like, hey, David was actually the first documented watcher of pornography. David saw something he shouldn't have seen. He looked again, and then he did something he shouldn't have done. Instead of clearing his browser history, he killed Uriah, and we see this person that's redeemed, restored, and empowered to be used by God in an incredible way. Moses killed a guy. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Saul persecuted the church to the point where he was ripping Christians out of their homes. Yet here we stand with the New Testament written largely by him. So it's I do get pushback, but the reality is God has positioned me in such a way where I have a unique voice in that. And I just want to use my influence to point to Jesus. And I don't want to use my influence to point to my story, because my story is not irrelevant, but like my story is I was really lost and really broken. And I had a radical encounter with Jesus, and his truth repaired, restored, and repurposed my life. Like I cling on to that word in 2 Timothy 3:16, is talking about all scripture is God breathed and it's good for rebuking and teaching, but reproof. Reproof means to dismantle and destroy. I had to dismantle and destroy incorrect thought processes, in lies in my life, the way that I saw myself, the way that I saw God, and the way that I saw the world, so that I could build a foundation in which I could reappropriate myself into the world. So, and that's what I get to share with people. It's like, yeah, I have a really good lesson of how not to live your life, how to fail miserably, and to rebuild my life based on God's truth. And but to your point, absolutely, it's like, well, how can you do all that? Well, the Bible is the best selling book of all time, and guess what? Those are still in the scriptures. Those stories are still important, but it's important to people to know, like, I don't want to point to my sin. I want to point to Jesus, and my story allows me to do that.
Yeah, not to mention the story of the prodigal son, right?
Right. Yeah.
He basically says to his father,
Luke 15 is important,
You're dead to me. And then he goes and squanders it. And,
yeah.
What's his father do? You're dead to me? No, he runs to him and embraces him.
And I think there's a great lesson in that, because people, right? So religious people, like legalism is the other son, right? Why are you doing that? Why you? I'm always here. I'm always working. Why are you doing that for him? It's like, no. So that's a great point.
One thing that I think about too is just our identity, right? Who we were created to be as beloved sons and beloved daughters. And I think you can speak to this quite well, which is why I'm bringing it up, because the idea of, well, I'll put it this way. Pope John Paul II talked about the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, but that it shows too little. Yeah. And, I think it's a beautiful statement, because I think we need to recognize that even though, these men and these women are in the industry, it doesn't make them any less beloved daughters. It doesn't make them any less beloved sons. They still have a great identity. They're still valued beyond compare. And can you just speak a little bit to that humanity, and that, even though they've been objectified, that doesn't make them any less of who they were created to be?
Yeah. I love that question. So from an apologetic standpoint, a question that I will ask a secular audience often is, I will ask, do you believe every person deserves human dignity? So if in through Christian worldview is like, does every person have intrinsic value, right? So most people would say yes. I've yet to meet someone to say no, a person does not deserve to have human dignity. So if that is true, when you say yes to consuming pornography because you're treating that person as a product and you're consuming them, what you're saying is their value is indicative of a product, and that person has no dignity. So that, like, that's what you're doing. Because yes, while we don't want to look past, like, yes, that was a mistake on their part, but you have the free will to choose to look at that content or not. So I think we're very quick in this culture, to like, even it's terrible. Like in regards to rape culture, it's like, well, she shouldn't have worn that. We have this mindset where we play the blame game. It's like we don't want to take responsibility for our own actions. We don't want to take responsibility for our own heart. We don't want to take responsibility for, our incorrect thought processes. We want to be fickle in that. Just the reality is you are saying that person has the value of whatever else because you're willing to consume them like a product. So that's your yes. And I think like that's the point that I like to speak to. It's like, man, like each and every person has value. Each and every person is important. Each and every person is deserving of love, honor, and respect. And as I've gone on this journey, it's so important for me to know, it's like, do I dislike or have any hard feelings to people in that industry? No, I love them desperately, but I hate with a venom and a passion the pornography industry.
Wow, that is so true. And as we kind of bring this podcast to a close today, I want to make sure that we give our listeners an opportunity to connect with your site and some of the work that you're doing. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how people can engage with what you're doing. And I mean, you're out there, you're on the front lines, you are all over the place sharing this good news of redemption. So how can people connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get in contact with me regarding, having me speak somewhere or anything like that, there's a contact form on my website. So joshuabroome.me. All of my social media is I am Joshua Broome. So that's my social media across the board. And as far as a resource, I had the opportunity to partner with an organization called Love Always Ministry. And we put together video curriculum called Search. And there's curriculum for men, there's curriculum for women. And we go through like, what is the issue with porn? What does repentance look like? Like just going through that systematically. What does God say about sex and dignity? And it's so important. And if there's just an overlaying message that I want to convey to people, it's like, who is truly pure of heart? No one is. So don't miss the fact that purity is not, it's something that you keep, it's something that you pursue. And regardless of what you've done, you can honor God through reclaiming purity in Jesus' name. And you can walk in purity regardless of what you've done or where you've been or what you did today, because Jesus will honor that. And it's a process and it's hard, but it's worth it.
Joshua, thanks so much for being on with us. We'll certainly be sure to include your website, the resources that you mentioned on the show notes so that our listeners can be sure to check those out and find them. And if you are listening, thank you for tuning in, because this is an important message that needs to be shared. What we talk about here on the podcast, it's difficult. But as you've seen, there is a redemptive story that has to be shared. And Joshua is being courageous in sharing that and being God's instrument. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to share these stories, share the resources and tools that we need to be free of the bondage of pornography. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review so that this can continue to get out and grow and share messages like Joshua's.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I have just walked away with so much information, so many powerful things that you've said today, Joshua. I am just honored that you took time out of your busy schedule. You have so much on your plate. If there was one thing, just one action step that listeners could take today as we close up the podcast, what would you call them to action to do?
Yeah, I would say if you want to change which direction that you're going, you have to take inventory of what's in your life. So, who are you following on social media? Take inventory. If it's leading you in a direction that you want to go, keep it. If it's not, get rid of it. What are you listening to? What are you watching? And in addition to that, who is speaking into your life? Like because your circle is leading you somewhere. So take inventory of your life, because the small things that are pouring in you, whatever is in you will come out of you. And what you want to put in you you want that to be in alignment with your values in the direction that you want to go. So I would say that. I mean, I would love to, like, I have like a step-by-step process where it's like, like take inventory, set boundaries, identify triggers, and then have accountability in your life. And, and you can do that by, signing up with Covenant Eyes and having that accountability partner, which is incredibly important. But like that's your process, right? So you need to know, I think if I would say this one last thing, it's more important why you say yes to what you do than what you actually do. Because when you identify why you say yes, that is where the solution lies. The solution lies in the reason, why would you agree? Why would you say yes to this thing that you know that you shouldn't do, that you know that's harming yourself and harming those that you love? Why would you say yes to it? Dig that up and identify that root, and that's where freedom is found.
So good. I hope everyone out there is taking notes. Discover the why. I love that. Oh my gosh, so powerful.
Yeah, Joshua, thanks again for being on with us. It's been a pleasure. And like I said, we'll share the website, we'll share that resource. And we really just want to encourage our listeners to check it out. And I will say, too, you mentioned Covenant Eyes. This is a great opportunity. If you're struggling with pornography, you're struggling to break free, find that mentor, find that trusted friend who you can journey with, who you can say more than I'm doing good. You can have those conversations if you're having a tough time or you're facing temptation. That's really what Covenant Eyes accountability software is about, is building that relationship, finding that ally to walk with. And we do have that opportunity, Karen, too, for our listeners, that if they want to try out Covenant Eyes free for 30 days, all they have to do is visit our website, covenanteyes.com. At the checkout, just enter promo code FREEPODCAST, all one word, FREEPODCAST, and you can try it today. So Joshua, thanks so much for being with us. Karen, it's been a pleasure visiting with you as well. And to all of you tuning in, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Covenant Eyes Church podcast.